The mornings here have always belonged to me, long before my daughter learned to walk, long before my husband ever thought to ask for coffee before sunrise. I was the one awake in this kitchen, listening to the house settle around me the way old houses do, slowly, deliberately, like a chest expanding with breath. I am 68 years old, and I have lived on this land for 41 of those years. I know where the floorboards give. I know which window sticks in July. I know the sound of the creek past the south field when the rain has been heavy, a low, rushing murmur that carries all the way to the bedroom if you leave the window cracked. My husband built this farmhouse with his brother the summer before we married. Red oak framing, stone foundation, a porch that wraps around two sides. He used to say the porch was the best decision he ever made, aside from marrying me. I used to pretend to argue about the order of those two things. I don't have anyone to argue with anymore. He passed 4 years ago, a quiet Tuesday in October. There was no drama to it, no last words worth repeating. He just stopped being here, and I kept being here, and the house held us both the way it always had. I was finishing my second cup of coffee when I heard the car turn up the gravel drive. I recognized the sound before I saw anything through the kitchen window. My daughter drives the way she lives, fast into everything, slow to leave. The silver sedan pulled up close to the barn, closer than necessary. My son-in-law stepped out first, adjusting his jacket even though there was nothing formal about a Tuesday morning in March. I met them at the door. She smiled and hugged me the way she had recently started hugging me, both arms, both hands pressed flat against my back. The hug of someone demonstrating affection rather than feeling it. My son-in-law carried a small bag from the bakery downtown. He handed it to me like it was currency. "We can't stay long," my daughter said, already looking past me into the kitchen. "Just wanted to check in. You know, make sure everything's okay out here." "Everything is fine," I said. She nodded, but her eyes moved around the room in a way that made me feel like she was taking inventory. My son-in-law set his coffee on the counter and leaned back against it with his arms crossed. He had that particular expression he wore when he was about to say something he'd rehearsed. I'd seen it at Thanksgiving. I'd seen it at the closing table when they bought their house in Nashville 3 years ago. "We've just been talking," he said, "about the farm, about the future." I poured my coffee and waited. "The upkeep alone," my daughter said gently. "Mom, it's a lot for one person. The field lease barely covers the property taxes. The roof on the barn needs work. You've said so yourself." I said the barn needed work. I didn't say I needed help deciding what to do about it. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. Her husband stayed standing. That was a choice. I noticed it. "We've been talking to a few people," she said. "Just exploring. There's a development group out of Chattanooga that's very interested in agricultural land up here. The offer they mentioned was significant. I mean, genuinely life-changing money." I looked at her. She had her father's eyes, green and direct, but somewhere in the last few years, she'd learned to use them differently. "This is not something I'm considering," I said. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Of course not right now," she said. "We just want you to have options, that's all." My son-in-law picked up his coffee and looked out the window toward the field. "All that land," he said. "Kind of a shame to just let it sit." I thanked them for the pastries. I told them I had things to get to. They left the way they always did, with hugs and assurances and the quiet undertow of something left unresolved. After the car disappeared around the bend in the road, I stood on the porch for a long time. The field was brown and still waiting for spring. The creek made its low sound behind the tree line. I have stood on this porch through 41 years of things I didn't see coming. I knew how to recognize the beginning of one. My neighbor Raymond had retired from practicing law the same year my husband got sick. He'd spent 30 years in estate and property law, mostly in Nashville, then came back to the county he grew up in and bought the old Mercer place 2 miles down the road. We had become the kind of friends who checked on each other without announcement. He showed up at my door with venison in November. I showed up at his with tomatoes in August. We argued about books and said nothing at all about loneliness because neither of us needed to. He was already on his porch when I walked over that afternoon. He had a way of expecting things. I told him about the visit, the bakery bag, the developer from Chattanooga, the way my son-in-law had looked at the field like he was already imagining what it could sell for. Raymond listened without moving. He had that quality in him, that absolute stillness when something mattered. I used to think it was a lawyer habit. I'd come to believe it was just who he was. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he set his glass down and looked at me steadily. "They're not exploring options," he said. "They're mapping the route." "I know," I said. "How's your paperwork?" he asked. "Deed, will, power of attorney?" I told him everything was in order. My attorney in town had drawn it all up 2 years ago. The farm went to a land trust on my death. I had no intention of signing it over to anyone. Raymond nodded slowly. "Good. Don't sign anything. Not a single page. Not for any reason they give you. If they come back with documents, you call me before you touch a pen." He paused and looked out toward the road. "These things move quietly at first," he said. "Then they move fast." They came back 11 days later, and this time they brought a woman I didn't know. She was in her 40s, professional, with reading glasses on a chain and a calm that felt practiced. My daughter introduced her as a family advisor. My son-in-law said she specialized in estate transitions for families in complex situations. The woman herself used the phrase elder care planning with the smooth ease of someone who had said it many times. I offered them all coffee. I took the chair nearest the door. The woman had a soft voice and a legal pad she didn't open until the second cup. She asked me about my daily routine, whether I drove at night, whether I had anyone who helped me around the property. I answered everything evenly. I had driven to the hardware store the previous Thursday, I told her. I had replaced the weather stripping on the mudroom door myself. She wrote something down. "My daughter watched me the way you watch someone you're worried about, which looked almost identical to the way you watch someone you're building a case against." The woman asked about my husband's passing, whether the grief had been hard on my thinking, whether I had anyone to talk to. "My thinking has always been one of my stronger qualities," I said. The woman smiled. "Of course." She wrote something else. My son-in-law mentioned, as if in passing, that he had taken the liberty of reaching out to my bank about some of the account structures. "Just to understand them," he said, "so we can help you manage things more easily as you get older." I asked him when I had given him permission to contact my bank. He said that my daughter was listed as a secondary contact on one account from years ago, and that it was all very standard, nothing to worry about. I smiled and told him it was interesting to hear that because I had removed that listing 18 months ago. There was a pause. The woman looked at her legal pad. My son-in-law and daughter exchanged something quick with their eyes. "We're just trying to help," my daughter said. "I know you are," I said. They left shortly after. The woman forgot her pen on my kitchen table. I put it in the drawer by the sink and called Raymond before their car had cleared the driveway. That night he came over with a folder and a thermos. We sat at the kitchen table under the overhead light and went through everything I had. The deed, the will, the trust documents. Raymond called his former partner in Nashville, a woman who handled elder fraud cases. He called a former colleague at the state bar who knew every property lawyer in 4 counties. He made his calls quietly and set the phone face down between each one. "Here's what we know," he said. "The woman they brought isn't a licensed estate planner in this state. I ran her name. She has a consulting business out of Atlanta. She's shown up in 2 prior cases involving families and contested property transfers. Neither went to court. Both involved elderly individuals who signed documents under pressure." I looked at the table. "This isn't exploratory," Raymond said. "They have a plan. They need 2 things from you: a signature or a declaration of incompetence. One way or another, they want legal control of this property before they can move on the sale." I thought about the field in winter, the way the frost sits on the grass in the early morning, silver, and still, before the sun clears the ridge. Then let them try to get it, I said. Raymond looked at me carefully. There's a way to handle this that protects you and builds a record at the same time. Tell me, he told me. They didn't call ahead the next time. I heard the car on the gravel just after 10 in the morning. 2 doors. Then a third. A heavier one. A different vehicle. I was in the side room when they knocked. And I came to the door with my hands folded and my face arranged into something pleasant and tired. The look of a woman who was not prepared but was trying her best. My daughter came in first, then my son-in-law, then the woman from Atlanta, and behind her, a man I had not seen before. He was large, quiet, and carried a leather briefcase. My daughter introduced him as a document specialist who worked with their family advisor on estate paperwork. Just a formality, she said. I let them all in. I offered nothing. They arranged themselves in the living room. My daughter sat beside me on the couch and took my hand, which she held like someone trying to keep a balloon from floating away. The woman from Atlanta opened her leather portfolio and laid documents on the coffee table the way my daughter used to lay out her homework, deliberately, creating the impression of inevitability. There were 5 papers. Each had tabs. The man with the briefcase produced a pen without being asked. This first one, the woman said, is a limited power of attorney, restricted to property and financial management. It allows your daughter to make decisions on your behalf in situations where you might not be immediately reachable. I looked at the paper. I did not touch it. This second document is a caregiver authorization. It formalizes the support structure around you going forward. She kept going. My son-in-law was looking at his phone. He wasn't even watching me anymore. That was how confident they were. The third document, she continued, is a land use authorization that allows for environmental and market assessments to be conducted on the property. Required for any future planning. Market assessments, I said. She looked up. Just standard practice, she said. I nodded slowly. I picked up the pen. I looked at each of the documents, taking my time, turning pages, appearing to read. My daughter relaxed visibly beside me. My son-in-law set his phone down. I held the pen over the first page. I just want to ask one question, I said. Of course, the woman said warmly. If I sign this today, I said, and your assessments determine the land should be sold, what happens to the farmhouse? My daughter answered before anyone else could. It would be part of the transition, she said. But you'd be taken care of, Mom. We've already looked at a beautiful, independent living community in Brentwood, private cottage style, really lovely. I set the pen down on the coffee table. I'm going to need a few days, I said. Mom, my daughter said. I'm going to need a few days, I repeated. My voice was the same temperature it had been since they walked in. That's reasonable. That's what any person would need. If you're in a rush, I'd want to know why. The room shifted. Not loudly, just a slight rearrangement of energy. The woman from Atlanta smiled professionally. Of course. Take the time you need. We'll leave the documents. They left the documents. After the car pulled away, I locked the front door and stood in the hallway for a moment. My hands were steady. I wasn't proud of the steadiness. I understood it. It was the same quality that had let me sit beside my husband's hospital bed for 4 days straight without falling apart. You find stillness because falling apart is not a luxury you've been given. I called Raymond. He picked up on the first ring. They left everything, I said. The full package. He exhaled. Did you sign anything? Not a word. Good. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was there in 15. He photographed every document on his phone and sent the images to his former partner in Nashville. He made 3 more calls from my kitchen while I made tea. Each call was shorter than the last. The final one, only 2 sentences. The second call, I heard him say the phrase, wire fraud clearly once, then drop his voice. He sat back down at the table. The document man, he said, has appeared in 4 prior estate transfers in 3 states. all of them involving elderly landowners who later contested the process. One case is still open in Kentucky. The woman from Atlanta filed her business registration in Georgia 14 months ago. Her only listed client is a property management company registered in Delaware with your son-in-law's name as a director. I set my cup down. He registered the company, Raymond said, 11 weeks before their first visit here. I thought about the bakery bag, the pastries sitting on the counter, growing cold. How do we move? I asked. Carefully, he said, and soon. Over the following week, Raymond coordinated things I was not entirely told about in advance because he said it was better that I know only what I needed to know and nothing that could be read on my face if they came back. I understood the logic of that. I had spent my career as a high school principal for 22 years. I knew what it meant to manage a situation where every person in the room was watching your expression for information. What I did know, Raymond's former partner in Nashville had contacted the state attorney general's Consumer Protection Division. A fraud examiner had reviewed the documents, the Delaware LLC, and the financial records. 2 federal agencies had been notified. A former colleague of Raymond's, who now worked in county law enforcement, had arranged a quiet coordination. And on a Tuesday morning in late March, 3 weeks after my daughter and son-in-law arrived with their document specialist and their 5 tabbed papers, they came back again. My daughter called first that morning to say they'd be stopping by around 11 to collect the signed documents. I told her that was fine. I told her I had made my decision. I was standing in the kitchen when they arrived. I heard 2 cars, not one. I heard 4 doors. I waited. My son-in-law came in first, which meant they had practiced the entrance. He moved through my living room like a man who already knew the square footage. My daughter followed, and then the woman from Atlanta, and then the document man with his briefcase. None of them looked at the 2 people already seated at my dining room table. It took a full 3 seconds before my son-in-law stopped moving. Raymond sat at one end of the table. Beside him sat a woman in a gray blazer with a badge clipped to her left side, a fraud examiner from the state attorney general's office. At the far end of the table, a man from the county sheriff's financial crimes unit had a folder open in front of him. Standing near the window was a second woman who had arrived 30 minutes earlier and introduced herself only by her agency, Federal Consumer Financial Protection. My daughter's face drained. My son-in-law's jaw moved, but nothing came out. The examiner spoke first. She said her name and her title clearly. She said that the documents left on my coffee table 3 weeks ago had been reviewed. She said that the LLC registered in Delaware was known to them. She said that the individual who had presented himself as a document specialist was currently the subject of an open fraud investigation in another state. My son-in-law said, "This is a misunderstanding." The sheriff's officer opened his folder and slid a page across the table. "The wire transfer," he said, "from the joint account you share with your wife to the consulting company registered in Atlanta. 4 payments. The most recent, 12 days ago." My daughter sat down slowly in the chair nearest the door. She looked at my son-in-law with an expression I recognized. It was the same expression she had at 14 when she realized her father already knew what she'd done, long before she'd decided whether to confess. She had not known about the wire transfers. That I had not expected. The woman from Atlanta and the document man were spoken to separately. I did not hear those conversations. I sat in the kitchen with Raymond and a cup of tea that grew cold while voices moved through my house in a way voices had never moved through it before. Purposeful, official, unavoidable. After an hour, my daughter came to find me. She stood in the kitchen doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen her look. Not physically smaller, just reduced. Like something had been taken out of her that had been making her appear larger. "I didn't know about the money," she said. I looked at her. "I knew about the idea," she continued. "He said it was a legal way to manage the estate. He said the advisor and the documents were standard. I thought we were helping you plan." Her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't want to believe that. Part of me still needed not to believe it. But she was not someone who cried easily, had never been, not as a child, not as an adult. And what was happening in her face right now was not something I recognized as performance. "I know," I said. "But you came here anyway." She nodded. She didn't try to explain it differently. I told her to go home. I told her we would talk later, when there were fewer people in my house and more time in front of us. The process that followed was quieter than I expected. Raymond sat beside me when the examiner returned to discuss the next steps. My son-in-law had an attorney on the phone within the hour. The woman from Atlanta cooperated fully before the end of the day. The document man invoked his right to counsel. The examiner asked me what I wanted. Raymond didn't answer for me. He poured himself a glass of water and waited with the same stillness he always had. I thought about my son-in-law, the way he had looked at the field, not with greed exactly, but with the particular blankness of someone who has decided that what another person values is simply a number waiting to be negotiated. I thought about my daughter, who had followed him into something she had not fully mapped because she trusted him more than she trusted her own questions. "I'm not pressing charges," I said. Raymond looked at me. "But I have terms." The examiner nodded and picked up her pen. "First," I said, "every document they filed or had prepared in connection with this property is withdrawn and destroyed. Every claim is nullified. I want that in writing from their attorney." She wrote. "Second, my son-in-law cooperates fully with any ongoing investigation involving the man he hired and the woman from Atlanta. Complete cooperation. No attorney-coached half-answers. Third, my daughter and I will attend 8 sessions with a family mediator. Not because I blame her entirely, but because we have things to address, and I will not let this sit unspoken between us for the rest of our lives." The examiner looked up. "And the fourth?" I paused. "My son-in-law will take a financial ethics course, not an online module he clicks through in 20 minutes. A real one, facilitated, with documentation that he completed it. He will not be in a position to make financial decisions on behalf of any other person until that is done." Raymond set his glass down quietly. I saw the corner of his expression shift just slightly. "Those are fair terms," the examiner said. "He'll agree," I said. "He wants this to go away. This is how it goes away." That evening, Raymond and I sat on the porch until the sky was fully dark. The field was invisible past the edge of the yard light, just a sound in the dark, the creak and the wind and the particular hush of a farm at night. He didn't say that it had gone well or that I had done the right thing. He wasn't a man who offered that kind of commentary. He just sat with me the way he had been sitting with me for years, present and unhurried, as if he had nowhere else to be. After a while, I asked if he wanted more coffee. He said yes. I went inside, and when I came back, he had moved his chair slightly so it was facing more toward the south field rather than the road. I noticed that. I didn't say anything about it. We sat until the chill came in off the ridge. My daughter texted just before midnight, 4 words. "I'm so sorry, Mom." I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the end table and looked at the ceiling for a while. I answered her in the morning. 2 words. "I know." We met with the mediator for the first time on a Thursday afternoon. The office was in a converted Victorian on the main street in town, cheerful in a deliberate way, with houseplants and soft lighting and chairs that were clearly chosen to feel unthreatening. My daughter arrived before me and was sitting in the waiting room with her hands folded in her lap. She stood when I came in. We didn't hug. We just walked into the session room together, which felt like its own kind of start. The mediator was a woman in her 50s with a direct manner I appreciated. She didn't spend the first 20 minutes building rapport. She said that we were both there because something had broken, and that the purpose of the sessions was not to assign blame or to heal the breach completely, but to make sure we could still be in the same room without the weight of what had happened, making it impossible to breathe. I found that to be an accurate description of what I wanted. My daughter cried in the second session, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, in the way she had cried at her father's graveside, with her jaw set and her eyes ahead, as if she could cry and maintain her composure simultaneously. She said that she had felt the farm slipping away from her long before my husband died, that she had watched it age and wanted to save it from what she thought was its own slow ending, that she had told herself the sale would give me freedom, that I was tired of it, that I deserved ease, that she had believed all of that so thoroughly she had not asked whether any of it was true. I had to sit with that for a long time. I told her that the farm was not slipping away. I told her it had never been hers to save. I told her that I was not tired of the land, that the land was the thing that had gotten me through the 4 years since her father died, that every morning I woke up, and the field was there, outside my window. I understood what it meant to still have something to tend. I told her that taking that from me would not have given me freedom. It would have taken the last thing that still asked something of me. She didn't answer right away. She looked at her hands. Then she said, "I didn't know that." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's partly on me." That was the hardest sentence I had said in years, but I meant it. Her husband completed the financial ethics course in May. Raymond confirmed the documentation had been filed correctly. The women from Atlanta settled with the state, and the Delaware LLC was dissolved. The document man's case was still working through the system in Kentucky, with additional charges added from what they had gathered here. Raymond told me none of that directly. He told me in the way he had always communicated, alongside other things, while we were doing something else, as if the information was incidental to the actual conversation. He mentioned it one afternoon while we were walking the fence line on the south side of the property. He had noticed one section that looked like it needed new posts and had brought tools without being asked. I asked him, while he was setting the post level, why he had never gone back to Nashville. He said the work he did there had been good but not interesting. He said that interesting was harder to find than good, and that when he found it, he preferred not to walk away from it. I didn't say anything. I held the post level while he drove it into the ground. Later, walking back, he said, "You should plant something along this fence line. It's too bare." I told him I had been thinking about roses. He said that sounded right. The roses went in the 3rd week of June. I turned the soil myself along the south fence, worked in compost from the pile behind the barn, set the root balls deep and wide, the way the old gardening book on my shelf said to do. I planted 7 plants, a variety my husband had always liked, a deep red one that bloomed through the heat and came back without much coaxing year after year. The court paperwork arrived on a Friday, a plain envelope. I sat down at the kitchen table before I opened it because I wanted to be sitting when I read it. The letter was 2 paragraphs, precise and legal, confirming that all documents related to property transfer and guardianship proceedings had been withdrawn, nullified, and expunged from county records. The land was mine. It had always been mine. The paper just made it official in a way that the law required. I folded the letter back into its envelope and put it in the drawer with the deed and the will and everything else that described, in formal language, the life I had built here. Raymond came over that evening with a bottle of something he had been saving and 2 glasses. He didn't say what the occasion was. He didn't need to. We sat on the porch and watched the last light move across the field, the long gold of a summer evening in Tennessee, the kind of light that makes everything it touches look like something worth keeping. My daughter called later to ask if I had received the paperwork. I said I had. She asked how I was feeling. I told her honestly that I was sitting on my porch looking at my field and that I felt fine. She laughed a little, a small surprised sound, and then she said, "I love you, Mom." And I said, "I know," and I meant that the way I always meant it, which was that love was not something I doubted between us, only the ways we sometimes failed to show it. The roses were already budding by the end of the month. Small, tight red clusters along the fence line, just beginning to open. Raymond pointed them out one morning when he walked over before breakfast, which he had been doing more often lately, showing up with eggs or bread or some reasonable excuse that neither of us examined too closely. He stood at the fence and looked at the buds for a while. "Those are going to be good," he said. I told him I knew. He looked at me with that expression he had sometimes, considering something he hadn't decided yet whether to say. I looked back at him and waited. The field was still cool in the morning shadow of the ridge. The creek made its sound behind the tree line. The house behind us was quiet and standing, the same as it had always been. The same red oak and stone foundation. The porch wrapping around two sides the way it always had, the way it would continue to for as long as I was the one deciding what happened here. There was nothing coming up the road. No car I needed to recognize by its engine. No performance about to start. Just the morning, and the field, and the roses opening along the fence line, and the particular unhurried quiet of a life that is still, undeniably, your own.